Welcome. We're with our distinguished and very special guest, independent scientist and radiation expert Leuren Moret, MA, PhD, ABT. Now, welcome, Leuren.
Thank you, Alfred.
You recently made a statement, and Ecology News is publishing it, that Hawaii and the Pacific Islands are, quote, unsafe for human habitation and swimming in the adjacent Pacific Ocean. And that's quite a statement for a scientist to make. And I guess that's really the subject of our conversation and interview today. Why did you come to the conclusion that Hawaii, the 50th state of the United States, and the Pacific Islands, which you'll get into in more detail, are, quote, unsafe for human habitation and swimming in the Pacific Ocean?
Well, the reason is because of it's really accumulated information over time since the Fukushima disaster happened. But it's also because I'm a geoscientist, and so I understand atmospheric circulation and the circulation in the oceans. It's all fluid dynamics. It's just an engineering concept of physics, a physical constant. But when you look at the amount of radiation that's been released from Fukushima, now no one really knows. We don't know who's telling the truth. We know a lot of people are lying. We know that right after Fukushima happened, in the weeks and months afterwards, that all governments were covering up the real levels. And the only data that international scientists that I work with, for instance, Dr. Busby in England, the only data that we trusted was from the monitoring stations that are buoys all over the oceans of this planet, and they are privately maintained by the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty organization that monitors radiation in the environment for treaty verification. So they are independently supported, and they did report accurately and globally what the radiation levels were. They were horrendous. They were horrific. But another thing that happened in August is that a Chinese scientific paper came out with very interesting data. It was a map of 1.5 years after the Fukushima disaster with the cesium levels, and it showed the tsunami debris field, which is all contaminated with radiation, extending nearly from offshore from California, from the West Coast, all the way to offshore from China. So this debris field is trapped between east-west currents, two currents that split off of the Kuroshio current, which starts in Taiwan. It goes north up past Japan, and at the top of Honshu, which is the biggest island, and before you get to Hokkaido, it splits, it joins with the Oyama current, which is coming out of the Arctic, and then they go off straight east into the Pacific, across the Pacific Ocean. They split, and the tsunami debris field is between the split currents that extend all the way across the Pacific. And so these islands, in particular, one part of the Kuroshio current, which is the strongest current in the world, goes directly to the Hawaiian Islands. So that current is 3,300 to 3,500 feet deep. and it's also 75 kilometers wide, nearly 60 miles wide, and it's traveling um, 2 or 3 miles an hour to up to 9 miles an hour. And it's a tremendous force. It's part of the Great Conveyor Belt that circulates around the Pacific and the Atlantic. And all of this radiation is being distributed all over the world. It's already completely mixed in the global atmosphere in 1 year because of all of the convection. And what drives it is the very cold polar regions, the Arctic and the Antarctic, and the very hot equator. And hot air and cold air want to mix. And the bigger the temperature difference, the more violent the mixing is.
Right. So the polar vortices may be even more have more of an effect of mixing the radiation. Is this part of the weather warfare for spreading Fukushima radiation?
Well, what the weather warfare, this weather climate change meme or fraud that is being perpetrated from England and also from the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, Nuclear Weapons Lab, where I worked. And one day in about 1989, I walked down a hall in the Lawrence Livermore Lab. I was a staff scientist, and I saw a door open, and I looked through the doorway as I walked by, and it was a big room full of young hotshot computer scientists, all sitting in these gigantic desk chairs or computer chairs at these huge monitors. And I said, "What is that group?" And somebody said to me, "Oh, that's the climate change group." And I went, "Oh, more science fraud at Livermore." And that's exactly what it is. This is my goodness. It's 20 years later. No, it's longer. Yeah, 20 years later. The the I'm sorry. Everything that I suspected then has been proven because people were so fed up. Scientists who are honest were so fed up with all this fraudulent, quiet climate change scam, and they hacked into the headquarters in England and into the Lawrence Livermore lab, and they got thousands of emails between the British climate change scientists and the U.S. climate change group at Livermore, and they proved that the whole climate change concept is completely fraud, and it's actually been perpetrated and made up and promoted from the City of London and the Queen of England to promote nuclear power so that she can sell her uranium. Queen Elizabeth owns all of the uranium in Canada, in much of Africa, and in Australia. And there's no way for her to peddle that useless energy unless she can sell it for weapons or for nuclear power. So that in itself, to think and realize that Queen Elizabeth's uranium has poisoned the world, all of the depleted uranium weapons, Iraq, Afghanistan, everywhere we've used them, Yugoslavia, that's all Canadian uranium, and it's completely illegal because it violates the Canadian Constitution.
Right. Now, what you said is, quote, anyone with a desire to stay healthy should never go to Hawaii or any Pacific islands in our lifetime. And then you go on, as you explained, one of the main Pacific Ocean currents is carrying the radiation from Fukushima directly east across the Pacific Ocean. Does that mean that you believe that Hawaii should be evacuated at this time?
We said that right after Fukushima happened. All of the Pacific Islands north of the equator should be evacuated. They should have been evacuated as soon as Fukushima happened. And even the northern one-third of Japan should have been evacuated, including Tokyo. Of course, that would be very difficult and incredibly expensive to do, and they're not going to do it because the people who have perpetrated this global outrage, they are using radiation, nuclear weapons, radiation, nuclear power, which produces fission products, and they're creating a global nuclear pollution situation, which is going to have many biological and ecological effects that are not favorable to life on this planet. And they are combining nuclear weapons and nuclear pollution for depopulation with HARP technologies and applications, such as the Fukushima tectonic nuclear warfare disaster, where they triggered the Tohoku earthquake at Fukushima with HARP and caused it to release huge amounts of fission products, which is a silent global nuclear war. And there's no place to hide. The tuna at the Tsukiji fish market in Tokyo, which I've been to many times, it's over a square mile, it's huge. And there are all these people running around with chainsaws sawing up frozen whales and frozen tuna and just huge fish and everything, and even sea mammals. The price of tuna this year at their sale, which started a few weeks ago, was 95% down from what they were paying for tuna last year. In other words, the price was 5% this year of what they paid 100% for last year. So the tuna industry, the fish industry is just falling through the floor in Japan, and China and Russia have said they are curtailing imports of food from the west coast of North America, and they may not buy any more fish. We know that the Pacific Ocean, the seaweed, the fish, the plankton, everything is contaminated now from Fukushima. This is from the Arctic all the way to the Antarctic. And this great conveyor belt that controls the world climate, it's actually the heat sink for the world's climate, circulates through the Pacific and then back through Southeast Asia into the Atlantic, around the Atlantic, back through Southeast Asia, around the Pacific. So this is just just a giant mixing machine in the oceans. And then the air also behaves as a fluid, and that has an even more turbulent, more violent, more convective mixing effect that's much faster than in the oceans. We do know from NOAA samples, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in the federal government, that they took samples, I think in April or May after Fukushima happened, just a month or two. And this was up in Alaska, and the Alaska fish and seaweed already demonstrated that bioaccumulation had happened. And what that means in the fish and the seaweed is that the seaweed and some of the fish, the filter feeders especially, they trap and they save, they store up they bioaccumulate the radioactive isotopes, in particular iodine in seaweed, 50,000 or 150,000 times higher than the water that the seaweed is living in. And it's also true in certain species that people eat out of the oceans. It depends on their eating habits and where they feed in the water column and so forth. But just within a couple of weeks already, the seaweed and fish and other sea life in Alaska was too contaminated to eat. Now we're nearly 3 years later. Huge amounts of gases and liquids have been, and solids too, been released into the atmosphere and the ocean. And that stuff travels a couple of 100 miles a day. The current will carry it that far. So I have sent you an image. It's the projection of the distribution of the debris field with the radiation levels in colors on it. And in 5 or 10 years, that debris field will be turned south. It's going to spread across the Pacific from China to the west coast of North America. And then it turns south. It's changed by the currents and also by the continents. And it goes back west directly along the equator to the Southeast Asia region, and that debris is going to end up spread all over the Pacific and all over the Atlantic, and then it washes up on shorelines. I just cannot warn people enough not to eat any fish out of the Pacific Ocean. They should be very, very conservative in the Atlantic. And fresh fish are even, it's more dangerous to eat them because they live in smaller bodies of water, so there's less dilution of the radioactive elements that are coming down into the environment. And this is a horrible story, but I have a friend in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's Japanese American, and he just told me a couple of weeks ago, we're in February 2014 now. So he told me around Christmas time of 2013 that he just loves California crab. He went out and bought a small, fresh California crab. The season's just opened. And he took it home, and he unwrapped it, and he wanted to cook it himself and clean it himself. And he said when he got through cooking and cleaning it, he started to taste it. But he said, "Leuren, I remembered you." And I went to my bedroom and got my Geiger counter. And he said, I put it on the crab, and he said it went off scale. He said, so I wrapped it up to take it back and get my money back. And then I washed my hands. He said I couldn't get the radiation out from under my fingernails. He had it all over his kitchen, all over the counter where he'd cut up the crab. He had it all over his hands and his clothes and under his fingernails. So that's a local crab from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm telling you, the Pacific Ocean is toast. And if we eat anything out of the Pacific Ocean, if we go swimming, if we go to Hawaii on vacations, we are toast.
Well, it sounds like, from what you're saying, Fukushima radiation is making swimming in the Pacific Ocean along the west coast unsafe for humans. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now let's segue to this. You've talked a lot, at least we've had conversations about, quote, disinformation or misinformation. And the LA Times, which is the second or third largest mainstream newspaper, recently came out with a major article saying it's safe to eat Pacific Ocean fish. There's nothing wrong with swimming, because there were all these citizens going out with their meters and a lot of information. Also in Alaska, the University of Alaska said there may be a problem with Alaska seafood, but the state of Alaska came out and said there's nothing wrong with Alaska seafood. And commercial fisheries here and there hire consultants who say, oh, there's nothing wrong with your fish. How do you balance out, or could you make a statement or an observation about the disinformation or misinformation or contradictory information? I guess people are really confused.
Well, the lies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the lies of today. And they begin the cover up of the danger of fission products and nuclear weapons and nuclear power eventually with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the lies and the cover up have never stopped. Now, what I did to counteract, to break through the cover up in Japan, I went on 20 speaking tours between the year 2000 and 2010. So I went 20 times to Japan, traveled all over Japan, spoke all over Japan, worked with the parliament, worked with the media, worked with citizens groups. It was the most life-changing, positive experience that I've ever had. If you want to have fun, take on a really big issue like radiation. But your life turns into a spy movie. But it's worth it. So, what was I talking about?
We're trying to deal with the disinformation and the misinformation which is out there on a daily basis.
Right.
Because people are confused. The LA Times is saying
yes,
the Pacific Ocean is safe to swim in, and Pacific Ocean fish are safe. The state of Alaska is saying Alaska fisheries are safe. The University of Alaska says, wait a minute, they may not be safe. So how are people to know, in your judgment?
Well, you have to look at the money trail. And so any state, any country that is being so impacted by a nuclear war, it's a covert nuclear war, it's the most intense one that's happened. They're going to protect their commerce. They're going to protect their fishermen and their fishing industry. They're going to protect their politicians, and they're going to protect their governmental agencies, and the federal government will also cover up because they have even more to lose by not hiding this truth. So you can't really believe the mainstream media. We know that already. If you have any ability to do critical thinking, you're going to look at the mainstream media and join millions of people who have bailed out of the mainstream media into the alternative media on the internet. That's all infiltrated too. But if you begin to educate yourself and you make networks with friends and people who are informed and telling the truth, who want to really sincerely inform the public, you can figure it out yourself. People are smart. They've just been told they're dumb their whole lives. But people do know something is very wrong. Women, grandparents, they know children are not healthy now. And there's been so much protest in the United States and other countries against nuclear power. Chernobyl was a disaster that increased global awareness, and it greatly improved the technologies and the instrumentation for measuring radiation. So a lot of good things came out of these very, very horrific, very tragic events that have hurt a lot more people. So um, it's just that they're very powerful interests who own the media. The Rockefellers, who are the big promoters of nuclear power around the world, they own GE and Westinghouse, and they own two TV networks. Their name is not on it, but they control the news on those two TV networks. You should see the list of corporations that suddenly are in partnership with Japan post Fukushima. It's even includes the Federation of American Scientists. It's surprising. Amnesty International is in cahoots with TEPCO and the U.S. government on this cover-up too. So, how can 6 nuclear reactors blow up and continue releasing horrific amounts of radiation? It's a really toxic, the most toxic biological poison that there is ionizing radiation. It's many times worse than chemicals, most chemicals. So the answer to all of this tragedy is education. It's exactly what we're doing and what we have been doing, Alfred. And that's the ultimate solution. That's the best option, because as people become more informed and the world turns on information, they're better able to respond in more appropriate ways to their own survival. We're facing global extermination. It's so hard to believe. It's so hard to wrap yourself around this concept. I was in denial for like 7 or 8 years just on the depleted uranium issue. And I said finally one day, wait a minute, this isn't an accident. These people know what they're doing. And that's when everything changed. I sat down at the computer and I started Googling a Google search on University of California plus depleted uranium, plus nuclear weapons, plus London financiers, plus Skull and Bones. And that took me down a rabbit hole that I'm still in. There's no end to it.
Now, you live in Berkeley, Berkeley, California.
Yes.
And you talk about viewing the weekly obituaries for young students in the Daily Cal there, the University of California at Berkeley, and you say there are frequent obituaries on students who died from mysterious ailments, and they were in their late teens or early 20s. One of them was a beautiful young athlete who surfed all summer in 2012, and she dropped dead from a heart attack, cesium, a few months after she came back from Hawaii. This is in response to a woman from Canada who wrote you concerned about the radiation in Hawaii. Could you talk more about that?
Yes. I like to read all kinds of publications, the free weekly magazines, the campus. I live in the city of Berkeley. The student newspaper has very interesting information and news about university happenings. And anyway, I started noticing at the end of last summer, the summer of 2013, that there was starting to be an obituary every week on the front page of the Daily Cal, which is the student paper. And it was a disproportionate number of young students. These are 18 and 19 and 20. Now, at that age, you're very active with sports and bicycling and things like that, especially because this is California and it's the Bay Area, so we have lovely weather all year long. People are outdoors all the time. And I started noticing these obituaries, and there was never any statement about what these young students died of. But when this particular young student, just a beautiful young blonde undergrad, when I saw her photo and her obituary on the front page of the Daily Cal, it really hit me. It was probably October of 2013. And I started investigating and doing other interviews about celebrities who were dying, who had radiation related illnesses, a lot of times from flying. The whole air column around this planet is contaminated now with radiation. Flight crews are dropping dead and have radiation related illnesses. Pilots are having heart attacks in the air while they're at the controls of the airplanes. It's really starting to show now. But going back to this young woman, I read the whole obituary, and she had spent the summer in Hawaii, 2013, surfing the whole summer. So I knew that she probably died of cardiac arrest or a stroke. That's the most common thing. Race horses, athletes, football players, soccer players. This is happening, not just a one team member. It's multiple members in the same week announcing that they have leukemia and heart trouble, and it's just hard to hide now. And when you think of the Olympics being held in Tokyo, Japan, in 2020, is that ever holding an athletic event in the middle of a country under nuclear war? It just seems completely Orwellian and insane, because it is.
Right. Now, there's sort of two areas there. You just brought up the issue of the atmospheric air column. Could we go there just for a couple
Yes.
of questions?
Yes.
Recently, we had a person who was actually a former Parks Board commissioner of Vancouver, D.C., fly from Vancouver International Airport to Heathrow, and she brought along her Geiger counter, and what she found was readings of up to 3.60 microsieverts per hour, and the annual limit for air flight attendants is 1,500 microsieverts per year. So we did a calculation that showed that at that level, on an annualized basis, that was 3 times the legal limit of what the FAA stated for air flight attendants' exposure to radiation. Um, why is the FAA not measuring radiation, and why aren't they telling the crews and the pilots and the passengers about this danger?
They're protecting commerce. They're protecting government agencies. They're protecting corporations. They're protecting the entities, the vested interests behind HARP and nuclear weapons. It's a huge global industry. Defense and weapons are more than half of the U.S. economy and budget. It's a huge revenue source for countries. So anything that threatens that is going to be covered up and denied. For instance, when the U.S. government decided to undertake nuclear weapons testing after what they considered Hiroshima and Nagasaki to be a huge success, they started testing nuclear weapons in the Pacific in about 1947, And they continued until 1963, when the Partial Test Ban Treaty was ratified by the Senate and signed by President Kennedy. He was desperate to stop atmospheric testing because it was killing so many American children, including his own. Jackie Kennedy had many miscarriages, and then they lost that baby Patrick, who was born full term right after they moved into the White House. So he had a personal interest. He was a Catholic man, and in all the work that I've done all this time for my whole life for children and women, it's the Catholic men who've been concerned about the children and the babies. Not too many other men were that concerned. So we have to thank, certainly no other presidents tried to stop nuclear weapons. He did. And he did stop them, and he gave his life for what he was doing for the American people. I don't know if people appreciate what he did. It's very difficult with the control that criminal elements have over the United States to do anything for the people. It's always ripped to shreds, and anybody who tries to do things for the common people, they get bankrupted or assassinated or run off the road, or they die in a plane crash, or they just get completely marginalized.
Well, while we're on the subject of air travel, do you think that commercial air travel is unsafe for humans?
The entire air column is contaminated. I mentioned that. And we know from the Mir spacecraft, the Russian spacecraft, the instrument mitt that covered the instrument package on the outside of the spacecraft was analyzed back down here on on Earth, and it was found to be contaminated with uranium and uranium decay products, which indicated that atmospheric testing, fallout, and probably nuclear power emissions as well, and the depleted uranium wars have contaminated lower orbital space. So that's why I wanted to do this interview and explain how dynamic the atmosphere and the oceans are. People don't realize how radiation can get from Japan all the way across the Pacific Ocean to the United States. They don't understand that distance doesn't protect you. It's weather and geography that determine the amount of radiation deposited in the environment. And there are cities, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, because of the geography and the location and the currents. Los Angeles is getting much more radiation exposure than the San Francisco Bay Area. It's just the currents and the geography and the winds. And cities on the East Coast, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and a city in Florida, they have the highest radioactive iodine levels in their drinking water of any cities in the United States. You would think it would be the West Coast, the Bay Area, but it's not. It goes wherever it goes, and with HAARP and the ability to manipulate the jet stream or whatever they're doing with the chemtrails, they're able to drastically change weather. They can create these huge snowstorms that are unprecedented. They're off scale. The Tohoku earthquake in Japan that caused the Fukushima disaster was a HAARP event. They've never had an earthquake of that magnitude in over 1,000 years. And I found out because the Japanese are very clever. They're very well educated. They're very smart people. They're very aware. And they started publishing investigations and documents in the media, on the internet, all over the place, that a magnitude 9 earthquake had never happened in Japan, and it didn't happen when Fukushima occurred, that the magnitude was a lie, and that the seismic stations actually measured an earthquake of something like 8.4, which would be much more in the framework of what has occurred in the past. It's consistent with patterns that we know over long periods of time. But a magnitude 9 earthquake has never happened in Japan, and I was really shocked because the U.S. announced that it was an 8.4, 8.5, and what you need is reporting from stations all over the world to refine the actual magnitude from a lot of monitoring stations. You need a lot of data, because one station is just reporting what's happening locally. And so if you have a network of stations, you get a better number and more information. And so it turned out, as the Japanese started publishing more, these are common citizens who did this work, TEPCO finally admitted that the reason that they wanted that magnitude is because an earthquake has never happened before. Therefore, they could not have anticipated such a magnitude that it would have done so much danger. Therefore, they're not liable for any reparations, because it's an unexpected, unprecedented magnitude earthquake. Now, what makes that all a lie and exposes what they're really doing is the fact that Japan has a magnitude 8.5 or greater earthquake every 5 years. It's sitting on top of 4 tectonic plates colliding: the Pacific plate, the Eurasian plate, the North American plate to the north, and the Philippine plate to the south. They're all crashing together right where Japan is located. It's one of the most active tectonic regions in the world, and they have 55 nuclear power plants built on active faults, because every square inch of Japan is active now. In some of the nuclear power plants that I investigated, and I held press conferences, and I studied them, and I toured them, and I just did a lot of work there with whistleblowers too. And the reactors in some of the power plants are built on geologic beds that are straight up and down. They've just been deformed so that the beds are up and down. They're vertical instead of horizontal. So that's the kind of dynamic setting that those nuclear power plants are sitting on. And it was insane to ever build a nuclear power plant in Japan just for that single reason. There are lots of other reasons now too, but it's not the right place to put nuclear power. In fact, nuclear power is inconsistent with life on this planet. It is a nuclear war against the whole world. It has always been a nuclear war against the world, but it's hidden, and we need to shut down technologies like this that hurt the entire biosphere. These are super lethal toys that citizens are allowing their governments to play with and then to spread around the world for profits, for the Rockefellers, for the Rothschilds, for Queen Elizabeth, for all these vested interests. Queen Elizabeth is the richest person in the world. Why is she executing and exterminating the whole planet so she can have more? Tell me that.
Yeah. Is that recent report by the UK Parliament that the palaces are falling apart and she needs $50 million to upgrade them? Is that just like political cover? Is that like the the spider having a false lair or something?
Well, Alfred, Queen Elizabeth is a sovereign ruler, and that means that all of the lands in her realm, which is Britain and the Commonwealth includes 16 countries and territories. She owns all the mineral rights because she's a sovereign ruler. She owns all the people. She owns all the offshore mineral rights. She owns British Petroleum. She personally owns half of Shell oil. She shares that with the monarch of the Netherlands. This is basically, these are two gangsters in tiaras. Queen Elizabeth is the East India Company, and Queen Beatrice, who just stepped down and her son took over as King of the Netherlands, but Queen Beatrice is the other gangster in tiaras, and she's the head of the Dutch East India Company. It's just big drug rackets. They're gangsters. They're criminals in very nice tiaras.
Right. And so that kind of consciousness doesn't appreciate art and palaces and actually lets them run down as kind of cover. I I just asked that because people are questioning that paradox.
Well,
Uh,
in terms of the land that Queen Elizabeth has legal claim to, it's 33 trillion dollars in land that she has claim to. 85% of the world owns nothing. Something like 25 people own over 12% of the world. She's one of them. She's the biggest landowner in the world. And she can't, she has to steal money from government funds for poor people. She was trying to get money from a government funding organization that gives money for people in the wintertime in England, money for heat. She was stealing that for her castle.
right.
There's no morality. There are no ethics. These people are complete gangsters. And her crown has the Maltese cross in diamonds all around it. That's the Maltese cross. That's the Knights Templars. That's the gangsters running the world. And she wears it very proudly.
Right. Now, let's get back to ocean circulation and Hawaii. You talked about the ocean circulation, the thermohaline layers in the ocean, the von Karman vortices, currents, the vortexes where fish breed and hatch and feed, the great the great conveyor belt. Is there anything more that you want to talk to our readers about, so that our viewers about, so that they get a picture of why it is and the mechanism by which this extermination, this radiation extermination, is occurring?
Yes. First of all, the this tsunami debris field that stretches across the Pacific is going to destroy North America. There's no way out. It's going to make everybody sick. It reduces productivity. It ends up bankrupting an economy. That's what happened to Russia. The Soviet Union collapsed because of Chernobyl. But Chernobyl was a false flag. It was engineered. It was designed and executed. It's a military deployment to take down the Soviet Union so they could end the Cold War. And they used the Cold War to develop HARP. It was secretly developed jointly by the U.S. and the Soviet Union together, and they did it at Leuren Moret Nuclear Weapons Lab. There were two Soviet KGB generals there in 1989 and 90. They were turning over the technologies of political control that they had used to subdue the citizens in the Soviet Union, turning it over to the U.S. government. And I asked my lab partner, what for? And he said, because in the future they're going to turn the United States into the Soviet Union and the Soviet Union into the United States. That's exactly what's happening now, just exactly the same way. And I mean, there are black helicopters flying over Berkeley in the Bay Area every day now. They're police deployment. It's the whole country's being militarized. It will not be very long before people won't be able to leave the U.S. They couldn't leave the Soviet Union. And Putin has revived the economy. He's re-Christianized the country. He's done a lot of good things for the Russian people, but there's a lot of good things that need to be done because of the horrific things that happened under the Soviets. It looks like the U.S. is going in that direction. Now, let's go back to talk about the oceans and the vortices and the currents and so forth. What has happened is that the Kuroshio current begins in warm water around Taiwan, and it flows north with a lot of fish and fish embryos in it. And it's a very strong current. It's the strongest current in the world, and it's part of the global ocean circulation. And it meets the Oyama current, which is a very cold Arctic current that's coming down the Caroline Islands along the east coast of Asia and East Asia. And it meets the Kuroshio current just south of Hokkaido and just north of the end of Honshu. And they move out east in an easterly direction into the Pacific Ocean. Now, between these currents, when the Kuroshio current is coming up from Taiwan, there's a counter current. And in between these currents that are going in different directions, they set up eddies or vortexes or whirlpools. And it's in those whirlpools that lift nutrients out of deeper levels of water in the water column in the ocean. That's where the baby fish go. That's where the breeding happens. That's where the fishing happens. And the whole east coast of Japan down to Tokyo is the richest fishing areas in Japan. It's much better than the west side that faces China. And it's because of these currents and the upwelling of food and nutrients and other things that to eat. There's a lot of plankton that lives in them. And I actually have photographs of them from space, taken from space. And you can actually see these vortexes from space offshore from Japan, and they're loaded with fish. Okay, they're right offshore from Fukushima. So the fish that are breeding there, that are hatching there, that are feeding there are all radioactive. And we do know that the tuna breed offshore from Japan in these areas I'm talking about. And all of the tuna that they're catching off the West Coast. 100% of North America is all contaminated with Fukushima radiation. The China study that I mentioned at the beginning of the interview is very, very important, because what the Chinese reported, they had a map showing the cesium levels from China to the coast of North America, and over time, this cesium is increasing in the tsunami debris field, and it's higher, it's getting higher faster with the end of that debris field that's heading for North America than the end of it, which is heading for China. And the reason that the cesium levels are increasing is because the debris field is picking up or attracting or mixing with the continual releases from Japan. So the cesium levels are just getting higher and higher. Now, cesium is just the index. It's an indicator for nearly 2,000 other fission products that are coming out of Japan, out of Fukushima. So cesium is only one element, one isotope, or one family of isotopes that are very dangerous. Cesium is especially dangerous because it attaches to the heart, and that is why we're having so many heart attacks and heart trouble, strokes, and so forth. It's the effects of the cesium, and it's just increasing. The levels are increasing in the Pacific that people and wildlife and even plants are being exposed to. Every day it's increasing. There's no way to turn it off. It's a nuclear war.
Now, let's jump back to heart just a second, because we've had conversations at which you state that the radiation could actually be neutralized via a Tesla-based technology like HAARP. Could you talk more about that?
I have not seen any publications. I have not heard any scientists talking about it. My time with the nuclear weapons and nuclear industries and earth sciences and academia, I've seen nothing but desperate attempts to murder scientists, to isolate them, to discredit them. Anyone who's come up with an alternative technology to clean up radiation has been horrendously attacked. And that indicates to me that there is a secret cabal controlling this global nuclear pollution that has been engineered over a period of 100 years. And they have now combined nuclear technologies with Tesla, which is an energy technology, so they can cause natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, anything they want to. They can trigger it with HAARP, and then they're attacking nuclear facilities so that the nuclear pollution globally is mixed in a year. And it's for depopulation. There's no other explanation. And these people are insane.
Right. But from a theoretical standpoint, the HAARP technology could be used to neutralize the radiation.
It's the only thing that
Right.
I know of that could possibly deal with this extreme form of energy.
Right.
And what I want to say is that these elements, uranium, plutonium, these nuclear elements, and all the elements have been made in star processes out in space. That's what stardust is. And then planets and solar systems condense from a big dust cloud that formed out in outer space. And It's just collapsing stars and solar systems and creating supernovas and red giants and white dwarfs and all these different star systems. Each of those star systems makes different elements. So when you're inhaling or ingesting plutonium, just one atom, or uranium, you're swallowing, inhaling a tiny piece of a supernova. Do you have any idea what the energy regime of a supernova is? We're just like a bag of water. So just drop a piece of a supernova in a bag of water, and you destroy it pretty fast.
Right. Now, but still, getting back to the HARP issue and the Tesla technology issue, theoretically at least, the controllers of HARP, that's a political question. So if there were a political transformation where the controllers of HARP shifted and were willing, new controllers came in to use HARP to neutralize the radiation, then that's one way that this attempted extermination, that this genocide could be halted, correct?
Yes, there's another way to look at it, and that is that the vested interest behind the development of weapons of mass destruction, the bioweapons, the chemical weapons, and the nuclear weapons, and the energy weapons, the Tesla technologies, they have very specific goals and agendas. And they've been working on these for thousands of years. This goes all the way back to Mesopotamia, that they wanted to reduce the world population. They want to drive countries into debt and credit. They invented corporations, all of this. And so these ideas have been around for a long time. They just didn't have the scientific knowledge or technologies to carry out their goals. Now, in the last 100 years, these weapons of mass destruction, the development of them based on Tesla technology and nuclear technologies, is just a runaway, a very, very destructive super toys that they should never have been developed because they've been misapplied from science that could have benefited humanity. Well, they're using it to exterminate humanity and modify humanity. They're changing the chromosomes on the human race. And I just got lost.
Well, no, that we're talking about HARP and about
Yes, yes,
shifting,
yes,
and if we could achieve an
yes.
awakening of humanity sufficient that humanity would affect a changing of the guard of the controllers of HARP,
Right.
then this radiation, we would shift it from a Death Star back to a Life Star, our
The
planet.
the financiers are the ones who are the beneficiaries of weapons of mass destruction. So when the Club of Rome suggested making a bioweapon that exactly fits the description of AIDS and HIV, Congress was happy to fund the development of that bioweapon. They gave the Army the money, and the Army developed HIV/AIDS at Fort Detrick. But it came out of the Club of Rome, the ruling elite. And what they demanded in the 60s was a bioweapon that fit the description of AIDS or HIV, and it would be delivered with an antidote and a prophylactic, so that people who didn't want to get it could use this prophylactic to prevent it, and the antidote was to turn it off when they had reached their kill goal. Now, all of these countries where they've been using radiation, Dick Cheney was sending people over to Iraq to measure the radiation levels all the time. They're doing a dose response, and these they did 2 weeks or a week of radiation surveys on a grid over the Bay Area, Berkeley, San Francisco, all the way to Pacifica on the coast. So that was a radiation survey to see how much more radiation they want to dose North America with. This is all deliberate. All the nuclear technologies are for, it's a kill rate. They've studied all of them, exposure of populations, human populations, to all these levels. So I am quite certain that any technology or bioweapon or whatever that the New World Order, the financiers, request governments to fund the development of, are going to have a preventive and a way to turn it off, a prophylactic and I can't remember. Anyway, they're going to ask for that with any weapon that they put an order in for.
A stopping mechanism once they've reached their depopulation goal.
Yes.
Right, right. Now, you have been active in Hawaii in the raising awareness with regard to depleted uranium testing and weapons. You've been active in the legislature of Hawaii. You know the Hawaiian Islands. You know the effects of radiation there. You have just come out publicly stating something that is quite serious. Fukushima radiation has made Hawaii and the Pacific Islands unsafe for humans. What messages do you have for the people of Hawaii? I mean, we both know that there's a very aquatic culture there. People are swimming with the dolphins. People spend a lot of times, from toddlers to old people, in the ocean. From the Polynesian culture, the Hawaiian native culture, to the tourists swimming, and people have gone there back to the land, paradoxically, to seek the one healthy place left. And it's all very paradoxical and very cruel, if your facts are correct. So, and they seem to be correct. So what do you say to them? Do you think people are going to listen?
People are listening. Alfred, people listen to our interviews, the updates on Fukushima all over the world. When no one else would interview me, you were the only person. And it means that people do want this information. People do want solutions. People do want to know, even as horrible as the information is. They want to know how to protect their families, their children, their communities. And the answer is to come together. Humanity has to come together like a global family and share the information, help each other. Everyone should have a Geiger counter in their home. You can even make them. The children can make them if you supervise them, or even just give them the directions. It's all over the internet. So people need to have the instrumentation to be able to measure it themselves. Then the government can't lie to them. That's what happened in Hawaii, and that's why I was so successful there. I've gotten 37 depleted uranium bills in state legislatures, but I wanted one in Hawaii, in the Hawaiian legislature. So I went to Hawaii for 3 months. And 3 months after I got there, I had taught the the citizens on the Big Island and Oahu, some of them in Oahu, how to use Geiger counters and air monitors. We formed a citizen posse. It was a caravan of cars with concerned citizens and Geiger counters. And we went all over the Big Island of Hawaii. We taped very high levels when I knew they were shooting depleted uranium bullets at Pohakaloa, which is the army base between Kona and Hilo on the Big Island. It's in the saddle between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa. And I went on TV, and nobody even knew that there was a radioactive atom in all of Hawaii. And I said the whole islands, the archipelago, was contaminated. And I put their cancer map by their own health department on TV. I took a video, someone videotaped me doing the measurements. That was on television. It started a global citizens Geiger counter movement. And that's what busted through the military, the health departments. The Army collapsed in 3 months because I said I put people in their homes with Geiger counters plugged into their computers all around Pohakaloa and Kona and Hilo. And finally, the Army, after 3 months, broke down and admitted that all of Hawaii was contaminated with their radiation from weapons. So they're still doing it. The citizens are following their politicians, their senators, their members of Congress to every event on the Big Island and waving Geiger counters at them. I was there in 2007. They're still going after their politicians about the radiation there. There are Hawaiians measuring the Fukushima radiation. There are people in Hawaii who are aware. But the tourist industry, the fishing industry, the real estate industry, they're all trying to hide it. But most of all, the governments, the federal and the state governments, are hiding it from commerce and the citizens and the tourists.
So we now have been doing these both exposés and updates since March 11, 2011, the date of the Fukushima nuclear false flag radiation event. How would you characterize where we're now on Monday, February 3rd, 2014? If you had to characterize where we are today in kind of the rollout and the awakening of humanity to cope with this and do something about it, how would you characterize it?
I would say that you and I have had a very major impact globally on people's awareness. I know that. I would say that it's because of our attitude, it's our openness, it's the spirituality that we are counting on to energize our effort. And other people who are being effective now, like Kevin Annett and these tribunals against the Queen of England and the popes for the global pedophile rings. That's how they maintain their power. It's by destroying children. Things like that are the real reason. That's my real motivation. It's to protect people. It's to protect the young. It's to protect the people who can't protect themselves. So I think that people know that we're sincere. And even when people give disinformation and they're lying about it and for whatever reasons, in the end, the truth does prevail. I don't have any power. You don't have any power. It's the information we're presenting to the public that has the power. And it's that information that empowers other people. I'm interested in presenting good information, and I'm interested in empowering other people to come together, to find solutions themselves on their own, and then to share it with other people, whatever way they can make it work. But I sure don't want to get in their way. I don't want to tell them what to do. I don't want to tell them how to interpret what I'm saying. I think it's great when people don't believe me, as long as they go out and do their own investigation. That's what the empowerment is about. It's giving people permission to open their own eyes, to trust their own instincts, and then to step out of the box and go and find their own information.
Thank you. That's very insightful. We certainly appreciate your taking time out today to update us, and we look forward to inviting you back again to update us in the future as events develop. Leuren.
Thank you so much, Alfred, for all your years of support and concern, and the really excellent job you do interviewing me on a very difficult subject. You've done a very, very good job. Really excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.